Aliens are so cool. They're not real yet, but mathematically speaking, and I'm fluent in speaking mathematically, their existence is favorable. So we know about them in a technical sense, but have absolutely no way of predicting how they might look. But we love to talk about them. We love to discuss how one day we might meet them, which would let us finally see what they look like, but we're anxious to make a good first impression. It's a fantasy we share internally in our planet that one day we'll meet them and get off on the wrong foot. But to have just met them is what we want, so we reiterate that dream scenario of the day we meet the aliens. Every reiteration runs into that same clump of doubt right out of the gate. How do we picture the aliens? Some images in our history of this question have formed some of the common archetypes. You have the Greens, who gained momentum in the 20th century, but really showed up in 1955 to scare the kitty corner out of some guys from Kentucky. You got the Greys, who are shaped like beings allegedly responsible for the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill, pictured here, holding the being actually responsible for doing it. Then there are the unshaped guys, beings who are defined by their liquid-like anatomy, and this is where you start getting into the kind of alien life designed by a guy who's trying to make a point. Not all life in the universe is humanoid. Some of it is really boring and prokaryotic. Opposite of that guy's design is the alien who's basically a demon, which is seen in some conspiracy circles and bad science fiction. More common than either of these two are the aliens who are humanoid animals, usually bugs, often with horns and a big silly mouth thing. These guys are either the result of costume design budgets or blunt sci-fi script writing. But that touches on my point a little bit, that when we depict aliens, we're making choices influenced by an unthinking line of cultural assertions. If somebody casually asserts the existence of reptilian humanoids, there's a bindle of context they're carrying in. There's an ingrained notion that the beings referred to as reptilians or lizard people are a group with the ability to camouflage. What does a man, lizard or ape, need with camouflage? The ability to hide in open scenery or blend into the background is obviously best utilized when avoiding a perceptive threat. That perceptive threat should be us in this scenario, the scenario with lizard people disguising themselves as the powerful elite. The perceptive threat is undefined, mostly just a thematic watchful eye, which most conspiracists believe pervades all of their lives. That's the kind of thing that sits in the bindle of context when discussing aliens. Fears that reach to a person and tap their anxiety until a revealing image is formed. When someone says reptilian, that's a small indicator that they themselves may fear the watchful eye or are inherently distrustful of others. It almost goes without saying that this kind of person seems less than cognizant of how others actually perceive them, which is an interesting discrepancy in my personal experience. Someone deeply paranoid that they're being watched doesn't much care for how they're viewed. Someone much more concerned with the opinion of others might be the guy who thinks of aliens as demons or demonic in nature. The reptilian believer has a national mind, one that's concerned with political machinations at the highest levels of federal government. The space demon believer is probably not thinking along those same lines. They're much more inwardly focused, paying more attention to perceived morality than privately held beliefs. A guy who believes demons are not only real, but also what we would call aliens, is a guy who believes in sin, but not the soul. If it takes an alien invasion to iron out the sinners, then there's no need to worry. You just convince them that you're one of the good ones. It's just funny to think about this in any position whatsoever. Aliens are real, but they're tools of Satan. So all life outside of Earth is antithetical to God, despite all of it supposedly being His creation. And it's not a constructive or interesting critique to say conspiracists are loony, and I'm not highlighting anything earth-shattering for non-believers, but I think it's interesting to flesh out the anatomy of their worldview. Now, speaking of the aliens with a gooey form and liquid-like anatomy, these depictions usually give off a sense that the person behind them is a fan of Richard Dawkins specifically, as in they've read his book and actively pursue discussion around the subject of theology and religiosity, either to genuinely engage with the practitioners of belief or to tear down the systems they believe are holding people back. In essence, the shapeless alien is a compromise between creativity and the natural bylaws of physics, meaning to pay homage to an unknown truth over entertaining a potential falsehood. The shape we know to be most certainly without any premise in reality is the humanoid arrangement of greys and greens, who have a longer historical stake in the conception of extraterrestrial life, but less of a foothold in any scientific discussion, pseudo or surreal. Stephen Novella, a neurologist and associate professor at Yale, has covered the psychocultural implications that can be found in the design of the supposed Zeta Reticulans. As podcast host to The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe and the president of the New England Skeptical Society, he's posited that the key features of the gray aliens are unlikely to resemble any extraterrestrial life form for the resemblance to humans and the traits we most associate with intellect. The inflated cranium, so that they may think immensely, the bulbous eyes, so that they may see clearly, and the retracted nose, because boogers are stupid, and so it's less boogers for less nose. This has been a PSA. Please, before you draw that alien, think, empathize, then design.